For many years, Britain let its colonies in America rule themselves. This way of ruling was called salutary neglect. It allowed colonies to grow rich and free. In the mid-1700s, Britain wanted more control over the colonies. It needed money to pay for wars and began taxing the colonies heavily. The colonists felt this was unfair. They believed it was wrong to tax them without giving them a say in the British government. This idea became popular and caused many people to speak against British rule. The British passed laws like the Stamp Act, which taxed printed items, and the Tea Act, which made colonists buy British tea. These laws angered people. Colonists began to meet and plan ways to stop these taxes. They sent letters to the king and refused to buy British goods. This was called a boycott. These actions made Britain feel that the colonies were becoming too bold. It sent soldiers to keep order, but this only made things worse for both sides. Colonists wanted their own laws and freedom to make choices. Britain refused, and the conflict grew worse. This set the stage for the American Revolution. People in the colonies were starting to think that breaking away from Britain was the only way to gain freedom. They began to talk about independence. By 1775, the colonies were no longer just protesting taxes. They wanted to fight for their rights and freedom from British control. The Boston Tea Party happened in December 1773. Angry colonists threw British tea into Boston Harbor to protest the Tea Act. This act made them buy tea only from Britain. The British king and Parliament were furious. They passed the Intolerable Acts to punish Massachusetts. These laws were harsh and took away some of the colony's rights. The Intolerable Acts shut down Boston Harbor, placed soldiers in homes, and removed Massachusetts' local government. These actions made many people even angrier. General Thomas Gage was sent to control Boston with British troops. He had orders to stop the unrest, but instead of stopping it, his actions caused more resistance. Colonial groups like the Sons of Liberty worked secretly to plan against the British. They warned people of British plans and hid weapons to prepare for a fight. Committees of correspondence also helped by sharing news quickly among colonies. They spread the word about British actions and encouraged unity among the colonists. In 1774, British soldiers tried to seize weapons at Fort William and Mary in New Hampshire. The colonists found out early and stopped them by taking the weapons first. This success gave the colonists hope. They realized they could stand up to the British. It also made the British more determined to crush the growing rebellion. By early 1775, King George III declared Massachusetts to be an open revolt. He ordered General Gage to arrest the leaders of the resistance and regain control. On April 18, 1775, British troops marched to Concord to seize weapons. Paul Revere, a patriot, rode through the night to warn the colonists of their plans. Revere used a signal of 2 lanterns in Boston's Old North Church. This showed that the British were coming by sea. He rode to warn towns like Lexington and Concord. Revere was joined by William Dawes and Samuel Prescott. Together, they spread the message to nearby towns. This helped the colonists prepare for battle quickly. The first clash happened in Lexington on April 19, 1775. About 700 British troops met 77 Minutemen, local colonists ready to fight at a moment's notice. No one knows who fired the first shot, but it started the war. This shot is called the shot heard round the world. 8 colonists were killed, and the British moved on to Concord. At Concord, hundreds of colonists fought back. They used smart tactics, hiding behind trees and walls. The British retreated to Boston, losing many soldiers on the way. The colonists' success at Concord gave them confidence. They believed they could stand up to the British Army. This battle was the start of the American Revolution. The events at Lexington and Concord also brought more colonists together. They were ready to fight for their rights and freedom from British rule. Paul Revere's ride and the first battles showed that the colonists were determined. They would not back down, even against a powerful enemy. The American colonists had 2 types of forces during the war. These were the Continental Army and local militias. Each had a role in the fight for independence. The Continental Army was the main force. It was made up of soldiers from all 13 colonies. It was led by General George Washington, who became a famous leader. Militias were smaller, local groups. These soldiers were often farmers or shopkeepers. They served for short times and were less trained than the Continental Army. The British Army was much stronger. It had 42,000 professional soldiers. These men were trained and disciplined, making them a powerful enemy for the colonists. The British also hired 30,000 soldiers from Germany, called Hessians. Many colonists were angry that Britain used foreign troops in a war against them. British officers came from rich families. They bought their positions in the army. This system was different from the Americans, who elected or appointed their leaders. While the British Army was strong, it had problems. It was far from home and had to bring supplies across the ocean. This made it hard for them to fight for a long time. The Continental Army also faced challenges. It often lacked enough soldiers, food, and weapons. The soldiers were poorly paid, and many left the army to care for their families. Despite these difficulties, both sides fought bravely. The American spirit of independence gave their army a strong reason to fight, even when they faced great odds. After the battles of Lexington and Concord, the British Army returned to Boston. The colonists gathered around the city, trapping the British inside. This event, called the Siege of Boston, lasted for almost a year. The colonists stopped supplies from reaching the British, hoping to force them to leave. In June 1775, British forces decided to attack the colonists in Charlestown, near Boston. This led to one of the first major battles of the war, the Battle of Bunker Hill. The colonists built defenses on Breed's Hill, not Bunker Hill as planned. From there, they could fire at British ships in the harbor. The British had to stop them. General William Howe led over 2,000 British soldiers in a direct attack. The colonists were outnumbered, but they held their ground and fought fiercely. The British advanced 3 times before breaking through. The colonists ran out of ammunition, but they caused heavy losses for the British Army. The British won the battle but lost over 1,000 soldiers, including many officers. This made the battle a moral victory for the colonists, who lost fewer men. The Battle of Bunker Hill showed that the colonists could fight against the strong British Army. It gave them hope and inspired others to join the cause. After this battle, the British stayed in Boston, and the siege continued. George Washington took command of the Continental Army and planned the next move. In 1778, France joined the war on the side of the colonists. They sent money, soldiers, and ships to help fight against the British Army and Navy. Spain joined the war in 1779. Though they did not fight directly with the colonists, they attacked British forces in other places, like Florida and the Caribbean. The Netherlands also supported the colonists by giving loans and recognizing the United States as a new nation. This made the British face enemies on several fronts. Sea power became very important in the war. The French Navy helped the colonists block British ships and stop supplies from reaching their army. French ships played a key role in the final victory at Yorktown in 1781. By controlling the sea, the French trapped the British Army and forced them to surrender. The help from France, Spain, and the Netherlands was critical. Without these allies, the colonists might not have been able to win their independence. Britain struggled to fight so many enemies at the same time. They had to send troops and ships to Europe, which made it harder to focus on the war in America. For the colonists, the support from other nations brought new hope. It showed that their fight for freedom was being taken seriously by the world. The combined efforts of the colonists and their allies led to key victories. This teamwork eventually made independence a reality for the colonies. The final major battle of the American Revolution happened at Yorktown in 1781. The French Navy helped trap the British Army, cutting off their escape. General George Washington led American and French troops to surround Yorktown. The British Army, under General Cornwallis, was outnumbered and had no way to win. After weeks of fighting, Cornwallis surrendered. This marked the end of the war. The colonists had achieved what they wanted: freedom from British rule. The Treaty of Paris was signed in 1783. It officially ended the war and made Britain recognize the United States as an independent country. The treaty also gave the new nation control of land east of the Mississippi River. This allowed the United States to grow and expand its territory. Winning the war was a huge achievement for the colonists. They had fought against one of the strongest armies in the world and gained their freedom. The American Revolution inspired people in other parts of the world. It showed that ordinary people could fight for their rights and change their government. The war also had a big impact on Britain. Losing the colonies made them change how they ruled other parts of their empire to avoid similar problems. For the colonists, the end of the war marked the start of a new journey. They now had to build a new country based on the ideas of liberty and equality. The American Revolution changed history. It created a new nation, the United States, based on freedom and the rights of the people. The new government was built with ideas like democracy, where leaders are chosen by the people. These ideas were new and exciting for the world. The success of the revolution inspired other countries, like France and South America, to fight for their own freedom and independence. The war also made Britain think about its empire. After losing the colonies, Britain started treating its other colonies more carefully to avoid losing them too. For the United States, the revolution was only the start. The leaders had to decide how to govern the new country and make laws to protect the people. The ideas of liberty and equality became a strong part of American identity. These values still guide the country today, more than 2 centuries later. Many people gave their lives for the revolution. Their sacrifices are remembered, and their fight for freedom is still honored today. It is an important part of history. The American Revolution reminds people that big changes are possible. It teaches us the power of standing together to fight for what is right. The story of the Revolution is one of courage and hope. It shows how determination can overcome even the greatest challenges to achieve freedom.